Well, hello everybody. I've had a couple of requests to make bread and butter pickles, and I do like bread and butter pickles very much, so I've decided to honor the requests here. The recipe calls for 15 cups of sliced pickling cucumbers, and once again, now you measure your cucumbers sliced by the cup. I just do the cucumbers that I have available and hopefully have enough of the brine, the flavoring broth stuff to go over it when I can, and if not, I make more. So I am going to start by slicing my cucumbers relatively thin. I don't know what you'd call that. Is that 1/4 of an inch? Don't want them too thin. They don't stay as crispy if you get them too thin. And also, once again, I have removed the blossom end, cutting about 1/4 of an inch off of there, and I also cut off the stem end, same thing, about 1/4 of an inch. But as you've probably heard me say many times in the past, if you've been watching my pickling videos, supposedly the blossom end has an enzyme in it that prevents the pickle from staying crisp. So I remove it. I also now add pickle crisp, and I'll show you that and how much I add when I am ready to get to that point. Well, I will slice my cucumbers and my onions. It calls for 3 onions, and I'll come back when I've finished. I just noticed something interesting here as I was slicing. These cucumbers, which are a seedless variety, they produce nothing but female blossoms, and they all don't require pollination to produce a cucumber. These ones have actually got seeds in, and I didn't grow any other kind of cucumbers for them to get pollinated with, but opposite them, just a few feet away, there are some melons growing, and melons and cucumbers are in the same family, so I'm assuming that they must have got pollinated from the melon plant. They've got a few seeds in, not as many. I mean, there would normally be seeds all around here too, but it was interesting to see, anyway. Well, that brought me to tears. Now, the 3 onions that I used were large. I like the pickled onions almost as much as I like the cucumber. You could certainly use 3 smaller onions, or really reduce the amount of onion if you're somebody that doesn't like onions. I know a lot of people don't care for the flavor of onions. And if you're seeing slices there now that really have seeds, like that one, those are not ones that I grew myself, unfortunately. I added 2 large boughten cucumbers. I had plenty of cucumbers. I put some in the fridge to keep while the rest of them were getting big enough to pick. And I made the mistake of putting them in the fridge they were wet, I guess, from washing them off, in a plastic bag. And of course, they rotted. It really hurt my feelings. I had to throw out 7 or 8 large cucumbers. So I added 2 pretty good sized boughten cucumbers to my mix. Now the next part of the process is adding ice and salt. What does it say? I will put the recipe down below, the link to the recipe, as I usually do. It says 4 cups of cracked ice. Well, like everything else I do, I'm not going to measure the ice, just a good amount of ice. This is a boughten bag of ice cubes. And a 1/4 cup of coarse salt. Pickling salt I'm using. Any non-iodized salt would be fine. Kosher salt isn't iodized. You can buy non-iodized sea salt, that sort of thing. Just don't use anything that has the iodine in it. It will, as I think I've probably said 100 times before in my videos, supposedly that turns your pickles brown from the iodine. I've never done it. I can't say that I can prove that fact, but it's, along with the enzyme in the end of the cucumber, it's one of those things that supposedly happens. So throw my ice cubes over the side here. Okay, the salt should melt the ice, melt quite a bit of it, and start the brining, the pickling part of the cucumbers. And you'd leave it now at room temperature with a weight on for 3 hours. just a plate upside down and any weight. That's a 2-kilogram peanut butter jar that's never been opened, so there's 2 kgs of weight on top, which is more than adequate. It's just that if it does form enough brine that they start to float or whatever, it will keep them down below the brine. And that sits, as I say, I think I said anyway, for 3 hours. But right now I will put the pickling solution together just to have it ready. So we'll move over and do that now. Putting together the pickling solution, not quite sure what to call it. It's not a brine, I guess. It doesn't have any additional salt in it. And this doesn't get heated or used until the cucumbers are ready to go in it. But anyway, that is 2½ cups of just ordinary white sugar, a tablespoon of mustard seeds. I'm using the white mustard seeds. It didn't specify. That's the only ones I ever have in the house, I guess, is the white ones, but I presume you could use black mustard seeds or whatever you prefer. A ½ teaspoon of celery seeds. So things on the floor won't be good. And 3/4 of a teaspoon of turmeric. And 2½ cups of cider vinegar. I suppose if all you had was white vinegar, probably wouldn't make that much of a difference. But I happen to have both in the house, so I'm using the cider, which is what the recipe calls for. Well, I'll stir this occasionally over the next 3 hours while the cucumbers are getting ready. Hopefully I'll get the sugar all dissolved into the solution. Bring you back when it's time to drain the cucumbers. Well, they've been a little over 3 hours in the brine. Most of the ice has melted. Well, I guess almost all of it, really. So how much of that is melted ice and how much of that is moisture that the salt brought out of the cucumbers and onions. But anyway, it goes in a colander now. And you rinse the salt off of it, a lot of it anyway. And I let that drain and move on to the next step. Now they've been put into the mixture of the sugar and spices and vinegar, and they go on a sort of a medium heat. You don't want them to come to a boil, it says, but you want to heat them up to the point where they are simmering anyway. My instructions here, remember what it said. No, you don't leave them very long at all, evidently. You just bring them almost to a boil and don't allow them to boil, and then you remove them from the heat. So I will keep my eye on that, give it a stir occasionally. Bring you back when it's time to put them in the bottles. This is the Pickle Crisp granules, if you can read that I talked about a little earlier. All it is calcium chloride. This is put out by the Ball company, the company that makes the canning jars. And those are all pint jars. For a pint jar, it says a heaping 1/8 of a teaspoon. I don't have an 1/8 teaspoon, so I'm judging by putting about half of a 1/4 teaspoon in each one. Worked really well with the dill pickles. That was the first time I'd used it, and my dill pickles are very crunchy, which is what I like. So it does help the pickles retain their crispness, I guess. I'm saying that the pickles are ready. It said not to bring them to a boil. The brine or the liquid, whatever, is quite hot now, and I have noticed a few wisps of steam come off of it. So going to say that they are ready to go, I guess. And here's where I dribble them all over the kitchen, I imagine, but I thought I would put the pickles in first if I could. If I can get them to go in the jar. There we go. Not so many next time, I guess. And then I would put some liquid in after I get the jar full of pickles. Too many or not? I'll be right back with another with my lacto fermenting set. I've seen some of my videos that I've done there, but I have discovered that it works very well packing other jars full of things. If you don't get it as full as possible with the cucumbers, when you put it in the hot water bath, they shrink up and you end up with a jar that looks like it's about half full. It seems to be taking forever to get one jar done, but I prepared 6 pint jars. Not so sure that I'll need that many. Every time I say that I need extra, but jars have been sterilized and the rings, I don't bother with the rings, but the lids with the rubber rim have been in boiling water and then kept in hot water. If you keep the rubber warm and soft, it seals better. Well, that's one jar done, and I won't make you sit through the other 5. I'll bring you back when I've finished. Well, I had just enough to fill 5 jars, and now they're in the hot water bath, which looks like it's just about to return to a boil. I suppose because the pickles were already so hot when I put them in there. Tasted one on its way in. It still was crunchy and had a lot of nice flavor. Won't know what the rest of them taste like for several weeks yet, but once this returns to the boil, you boil it for 10 minutes and then they come out to seal, hopefully. So I'll bring you back when they're out of the hot water bath. There they are, out of the canner, waiting to hear them click and seal. I've been having good luck with that so far this year. Hope it continues. I hope this was of some help to the people who wanted to know how I make bread and butter pickles. Anxious to try these. The one that I tasted before they were canned was very good. Well, thank you very much for watching.